Good evening, everybody. We're called the Sweetwater County School District #1 Recreation Board meeting to order. The time is 6:34. Has everybody been able to review the agenda that's been presented? Are there any additions or deletions from the agenda as presented? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Motion to accept it.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We'll go to a roll call for Donat.
Certainly. Mr. Batolo,
Here.
Mr. Biter,
Here.
Mr. Portillo,
Here.
Mr. Duncan,
Here.
Chairman Gray.
Here. And we also have Kelly and Tom. All right, we'll go on to communications, correspondence, and public
And
comment.
Say that.
Yep, and Dan. Dan's with us as well.
And Dan, I'm sorry. Sorry, Dan. Is any public comment or correspondence you have to go over?
None.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is board information, recreation board terms. Officers are elected and appointed effective July 1st, 2020. So we don't have to do those today, right, Scott? If we do that the next meeting, we have to do it now.
Yeah, this meeting, we need to do the nominations for the 2 members whose term expires the end of June. And so then those nominations then will go to the board in June for their approval. And then the terms will start for those new members beginning July 1.
Okay, so that would be Mark and John's terms are due to expire at the end of June. Are both of you willing to accept another term?
I am also. Scott is also on there 20th too.
Yep.
Or Matt, I'm sorry.
Yep.
No, 22, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Scott, you are too. I thought
am.
you were 20.
Yes.
All right. Well, anybody, I'll entertain a motion to accept Mark, Scott, and John to be reappointed.
I'll
Motion.
second.
Who made the motion? Mark? Or Mark? Or,
I'll motion to.
okay, then I guess I have to second it since you guys are on.
Yes.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion carried. Board action, let's see. We've already done that. That's board members. Okay, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from January? Is there any addition or deletions to the minutes as presented?
I'm good.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to,
I'll motion to approve minutes.
A second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we'll go on to the next board action. It's recommended of the approval of treasurer's report. We'll let Mr. Duncan take it over from here.
Hey, for the Rock Springs National Bank account, beginning balance was $24,170.72. There was interest earned for the period ending March 31st of $56.06. County treasurer receipts for the same period, $112,000 of $121,749.29. For the WGIF account, the beginning balance of $9,307,924.75 with interest for the period of $33,231.52 for an ending balance of $9,371,156.27.
Okay, is there any discussion or questions regarding the treasurer's report? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented.
I'll motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, moving on to approval of warrants and reimbursements. Mr. Duncan.
Okay, so again, this approval is for the underlying two projects that happened this last quarter, as well as the reimbursement back to the general fund. So they include a pool chlorine controller and also the rec board's share of a 905M Caterpillar tractor. So the total reimbursement back to the general fund is $27,152.85.
Okay, any questions? Discussion? Entertain a motion to accept the rec board reimbursements as presented. Motion carried. All right, moving right down the list. That went to me paper stuff. I lost it. Okay. An update on recreation board projects. That would be Mr. Sorelli.
Well, I can start us out if you want. Dan, I might need your help. Dan and Mark to fill in the holes that I don't know, but I can start us off if you like.
Okay, Scott.
Okay. So I'll just go down the budget sheet under the expenditure line item. And so the fitness center repairs, those are ongoing. They usually come up once a semester. And so I know that we've paid out the ones for the fall, but that one is still ongoing. The district field impact testing, I believe that has been completed. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, that's correct, Scott.
Okay. The turf maintenance for the high school and the junior high, I believe those are all ongoing too, although the high school now is getting ready to be replaced. The Rock Springs High School Auditorium stage resurfacing. Can you jump in on this one, Dan? There have been no charges to our books yet for this, so I'm not exactly sure the status of this one.
Yeah, right now that we haven't done anything with it, with everything, and we just haven't had a chance to get to it. But we're going to do that one, and we'll tie that project into the same. We'll order the same material when we do Farsons as well.
Okay. So the resurfacing of the gym floor for the Tiger Arena, and these are scheduled for this summer. Is that correct, Mark? The three gyms?
Yes, those projects actually start next week.
Okay. So that's the Tiger Arena and the two gyms at the junior high, correct?
No, it's Tiger Arena, auxiliary gym at the high school, and the back gym at the junior high.
Yes.
You're right.
Yep, that's right. Sorry. Okay, the turf field replacement, that's ongoing. The master plan for the Rock Springs High School Park tennis area. Can you jump in on that one, Dan?
Yes, I will. I was asked by the superintendent to come up with a rough idea on what it would cost to do a master plan. And before, I actually did that before the state implemented the new rules on procurement for professional services. So all I really obtained was a rough estimate on what it would cost to procure So the cost of procurement for professional service that I was given back then was several hundreds of thousands of dollars, which means in order to pursue this whole idea of a master plan, we would now have to go out to and follow the state's procurement process. In the meantime, we met with Tom and we discussed other plans that I think we can actually come up with some ideas and then maybe go out to professional services to see, get a rough estimate on what it would cost to rejuvenate that entire area, because we're going to have to do something with it as the city puts down the sidewalks and we start working the whole parking area. We want to be able to also kind of include that, you know, that tennis court area. So at this point, it's very expensive to try to rejuvenate the you know, that whole area. But if we are serious about doing it, we're going to have to go out and follow the actual procurement process in order to obtain an architect in order to do it. But we're looking at a couple $100,000 because the scope of the work will be well over $1 million to do.
Are you looking to use the state funding to help with that? Or is that gonna be your?
Well,
We
honestly, Leo, that's a great question, but it depends really on our economy. Because right now, the director from the state is, I don't really even have 10% money to, you know, they want us to hold them back on all of our expenditures because they don't know how bad, you know, the economy is going to be. You know, the money that we get for major maintenance of our, you know, of our entire district depends on mineral royalties. And even though they've put money away, they now pay us quarterly. And if they don't get funded through their, you know, process, they're not so sure that we're going to get 100% of our funds, you know, going forward. So that's a great question. I mean, if I have the money, yeah, I mean, we can use major maintenance 10%. Remember, or maybe you didn't know, major maintenance money does not take care of tennis courts. Tennis courts are not really part of the educational package basket of goods. So therefore, anything to do with tennis courts is an enhancement and would have to be used either 10% funds or other sources.
Okay.
Okay, continuing on. The next item is the weight and nail drag, and I think this it's been approved, but I'm not sure that we've ever done anything in there, so we're still having that line item there. The following two items.
Where are we with that?
I'm sorry.
Where are we with that one?
So let me pipe in on that. So that has been turned over to Matt, our grounds guy, to get that purchased. And I don't know where he's at with that. I'll have to check.
Is this one being used out there at the area where the kids play, or where's it? Where will it be used at?
Mainly the softball field that we have there at the junior high.
Okay.
Okay, the next two items were the gyms that we've already talked about. There's an eval for the junior high turf field. I'm not really sure where that one's at, Dan or Mark.
We're not doing that one this year, correct? We're just doing the high school.
Right, and well, that was our game plan. Mark actually will have some input, but he did walk the field with some of the Hellas guys and did get some recommendations. So and we've got I don't know if Mark can step in. We had two prices on one type of coating, another type of coating, and then the third price actually there wasn't much difference in just doing a total resurface. But Mark, if you got any more information on that, I know you're waiting for that third price. Go ahead.
You talking the track or the turf?
So we walked all of it, and the track or the turf itself is in pretty good shape. They do suggest maybe having that maintenance program done that we did at the high school, where we paid the $10,000. They come up and they checked all the seams. They found over 100 seams at the high school that were coming apart. We did that last year before the season started. So they thought we should get that done on this field to prolong the longevity of the turf itself. Now the track, we do have some issues going on with the track. They did say about every 7 years you should have it resurfaced. And they did give me two different prices for two different resurfacing. One is basically a 2 mil spray, which they spray over the whole track. And first they repair any damages, then spray the whole track and then reline it. That, because they're in town, they gave us a price of doing that this summer when they do the track at the high school of $175,589. That would get us another 2 to 3 years of life out of that track. They have another quote that they've given me to put an actual 5 mil rubber back down on that surface, do all the repairs, put 5 mils down, then spray it. And that would give us probably, he figured, 9 to 12 years of life in that track. The price that we're waiting for that Dan mentioned was, they said because they're in town, they would also give me a better price to come in and strip that whole surface off and put a new track down, like the same track that's going in up at the high school. And he didn't have a definite price, but he thought it would be right around 200 or 300,000. Sorry, the second one to do the 5 mil lay and spray and reline was $239,969. So
We gave them 3 quotes.
the third quote, I don't have the actual bottom number. He said that his quote department didn't get it done, so he could send it to me. He ballparked it right around $300,000, and that's to strip everything off, start over new with the same new track that's going in up at the high school.
Well, Scott, if I'm not mistaken, that would have to be budgeted, and it's not in this year's budget, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to point out some pros and cons. By waiting and putting it into next year's budget, one thing, I know the cost is going to be a little bit higher, but since we would just be maybe resurfacing the track, because we can have the maintenance on the on the turf field anytime. But if we were going to go out for the track and it's just a simple replacement of the track, and basically they're coming in, they're tearing up some of the the rubber, and then they're going to put new rubber down, that we could go out to bid and get competitive bidding. So I think we might see a difference in prices as well. The nice thing I like about doing the track and doing maintenance on the turf and then replacing the track is it kind of offsets our track and field payouts as far as doing major overhauls. What I really don't want the next person, or if it's still us, to get caught up in is doing another complete field and turf replacement. It's pretty expensive to do all at once, and would be kind of nice to be able to stagger those costs, so that maybe every 7 years you have a couple $100,000 come up, and then because we wouldn't be in the mess with the high school field, other than the fact we have to actually go down into the substructure. But once you have that substructure in, it's kind of nice, rather than coughing up $600,000 and whatever it is, just maybe a couple $100,000 every so many years in a cycle. Well, that's just one of my thoughts about it.
So
real quick, bring up to
have them come up and give us an estimate and evaluate what all needs to be done. Is that what I'm hearing? The 5,000 we have is evaluation.
Well, there's 2 different things. One evaluation is if they come up and actually do the, to give us an evaluation on the turf field, I believe. And like Mark was saying, last year when we had the evaluation done over at the high school, they came in and it was right around $10,000 to repair all the seams. But I think we know the track has to be resurfaced. If the cost difference between resurfacing it with a really good coat versus just milling it off and spending another $50,000 to actually replace it. The longevity of a replacement field is obviously longer than just coating it. So if we defer that cost till next year and just go out to bid, because anybody will put their track surface over the asphalt that we have. The reason why we didn't go out to bid this time is because it's a hellish. Everything is designed hellish as far as the drainage and the substructure. But later on with the tracks, as far as replacing the tracks, that's a much easier job to do. It's a lot less costly just to go out and, they just like milling a road. They take off the top and they come back in and put another track surface down. But we can go out to bid for that next year and give us time to put that in the budget.
Any more discussion on that?
I just wanted to say we did walk that track, and there is some wear and tear and some damage going on with that track. Some cracks that's letting some water get down below the subsurface, and we could start seeing some of the issues that we have at the high school there. So I agree with Dan. Probably waiting till next year and go out to bid so we get the best competitive price that we can get. But it is probably really going to need to be looked at next year.
Can they come in and do any kind of temporary repair to keep it from getting more damage?
That was the first quote, that $175,000. That's basically to spray a seal coat over the top and reline it. And I asked them why the cost, it was only, another, $60,000 to go to the 5 mil layer. The first one, to do just a seal coat over the top of it, they have to mask and cover all the bleachers and everything around so that when they spray, it doesn't get everywhere. The other two quotes that I have, the one I have now and the other one that they're bringing me or going to be sending me, they don't spray that wide of an area. So it's a different process.
Mark, how's the turf field over there holding up? And I'm wondering when that would be up for replacement based upon condition.
The condition of that thing is way better than what the high school is. I know they're a year apart. It's a year newer, but it is in better shape at its age now than what the high school's was at that same age. It's a different product and it's easier to maintain. And Hellas has told me that. And I've done the maintenance on that turf field. It is a lot better turf. Sean Group and I walked it just the other day, and he was really impressed with the gentleman, Cleve, who's been taking care of that, Jerry Porter at the high school, and how well he takes care of it and how it looks. He just done it earlier this week. No, last week. I'm sorry, last Wednesday. And the field looks really good.
Okay. Well, and the reason why I'm asking is, we do have some deferred maintenance funds set aside for the replacement of those. And so I don't know what it is at the end of this year, but for the end of next year's, it'll be just shy of $1 million. So it's possible that we have some funds there without having to find, new revenues to cover those projects.
Okay.
I'd need a breakdown though of how much for which one, how much for the turf, and then how much for the track.
Right. Well, the price we have now for them to tear up that track and replace it. Now, granted, this is because they're in town now, was right at $300,000. That'll give us a total new surface that has a lifespan, he said, 15 to 20 years. And then a new turf field, I think, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, are we at about $600,000 just for the turf replacement at the high school?
It's about 1.3 total.
450 budgeted. Or is that just our share? And then you're using 10% major maintenance?
No, I think that's all rec board. So about 450.
Yeah, Leo, I'm glad you brought up 10% because that whole project is an enhancement. I checked on that today, so I can use 10%, but because of again with the economy, I really don't have a lot of 10% that I can be throwing 100,000 or more than that on a project like that.
Okay. All right, let's continue. Any more discussion on those? Scott?
Okay. Going down further, the tractor and the plow, I believe that's complete as well. And that was part of the reimbursement that were approved in the warrants tonight. the weightlifting as well. The Rock Springs High School geo study, I believe the work has been done, but they haven't billed us out for that. Is that correct, Dan?
That is correct. And talking to James, and their business office is a little out of sync with the guys out in the field, but it looks like they're going to put that, like you and I had discussed, they're going to put that on the contract on the back end when they bill us as they're going through the replacement.
Okay. All right, and that completes the update.
Okay. With that, any more discussion on the projects? Not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the projects. Update is presented.
I'll make a motion to.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, moving on to 6. Oh, we didn't even need to. Scoreboard update. Is that you, Dan? Mark?
Actually, it's either Mark or Tom.
Leo,
Yes.
just a quick update for the rec board. One of the things that we know that we've brought up within the rec board before is that our current scoreboard is under a contract with Pepsi. And
Mhm.
I believe that contract goes, excuse me, for 2 more years. I was in contact with Pepsi yesterday, just to let them know as a courtesy that our rec board would be discussing the scoreboard. And it was great conversation. It was just so that both parties were well aware of what was going to be discussed and not reading about something after the fact, but also knowing that there's a new track and turf field being brought in and things would be tore up. It's kind of a natural discussion point to talk about the scoreboard.
Mhm.
Of course, nothing more than that on that conversation, but that was with Sean Valentine. And so, like I said, good conversation, very much appreciated. Notice of, our discussions with the rec board and told them, no decisions or anything on what this board may choose. The only comment to extend to this board would be the appreciation for their work with the school district and the products and courtesy that they give back to our community was also well appreciated and extended to them.
I think part of the deal that we were looking at this year with the scoreboard was, while we had everything tore up, was run a new conduit from the press box down there from the new electrical panel you're gonna have to put in, because I think we have to run new electrical all the way out there, do we not?
Yeah, Leo, that'd be correct. Mark is actually working on that, and what we'll do is when they start tearing out that track, Mark has already had Wild Electric look at everything, but we're still going to have cut sheets. So we'll run the conduit there. I'm not so sure we'll pull wire or anything yet, mainly because in my mind the big question is this. I would imagine this has to go out to bid. If it has to go out to bid, there's going to be different cut sheets from different manufacturers. So we will run conduit out there if the one that we currently have is not big enough, or just simply not enough in numbers, because sometimes you can't run your communication wires in with your line voltage wires. But we'll make sure that we have the infrastructure will be there and in place in case, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, we end up putting up a scoreboard. We don't want to have to go back and wish that we had put the infrastructure in. So we will have the proper infrastructure as far as the conduit sizes. underneath there will be run.
Tom, did you have anything to add to that?
I've actually been in communication quite a bit with Daktronics to kind of come up with a scoreboard that I think is going to be very useful for us, that can have use of multiple different facilities, meaning different programs as well as with the school, and have an educational base to it. And I've got a lot of information. I'm more than willing to kind of share it all. I know sharing online is kind of hard to be able to review it. I'm more than willing to be able to do that so that the committee can see what has been the presentation and what I have as an option, what I think would be conducive for our uses in these times, as well as for the future and for multiple uses. So it's completely up to the will of the board. I can go ahead and present that and show it to you and kind of give you an idea as to what the cost is and go through it.
Would this, Scott, be put on the next year's budget agenda too? I don't think we have anything for this year except for maybe putting the utility access in the ground.
Yep, if the board chose to go that way, they would have to come out of the discretionary budget line item
Okay.
for this year. But if it's a will of the board, we can build it into the budget next year as well.
As
But
far as the replacement, or
Yeah, whatever the will of the board would be. But I'm wondering about the timing of it. If the current contract still runs for 2 more years, yet if we're wanting to do something next year, I'm wondering how that plays out.
yeah, I can understand. I think the biggest thing would be, Kelly, is if when you were discussing with Sean, is they just want to see Pepsi's name up there, correct? Even though we would try and get them to help support by paying for part of the scoreboard or supplying it, which could be.
That's correct, Leo. And actually, just for information for this board, that is actually the second extension of a contract that the school district has with Pepsi. And that was how the second extension came to be, was when the scoreboard had some upgrades to it. I don't know if it was a complete replacement, but I know that is what lended itself to the second version of the contract that's actually been in place for quite some time now. So, and it was that understanding that with those upgrades or replacement, there was a portion of the scoreboard that was paid for by Pepsi. And then that was to reciprocate having some exclusive rights for Pepsi within the district.
So how would that fit in, Tom, to what Daktronics is offering?
I don't think it would have too much of a concern at all. We would easily be able to accommodate whatever the Pepsi needs are. We could look into seeing what they would be able to support based on the presentation that I have or the scoreboard that I would like to see. I know we've got an agreement already set up with Pepsi until 2022, I believe is what it is. And within each of the banners and the size, we would definitely have their name there. It wouldn't be any conflict there at all. So I don't see an issue with it. We definitely have to make sure that we get with Pepsi and make sure that they are able to see what we have and agree to the contract, and other things wouldn't change at all. We would still make Pepsi our exclusive drink and their byproducts and proceed from there.
Okay. Since this is just an informational item, Scott, we can't really move. We can make a motion to maybe do the utility stuff this year with the discretionary funding, and then maybe put it into the budget for next year for replacement.
Yes.
Leo, just for clarification, on the agenda, if an item is information, if it is the will of the board on an information item, as long as there's the motion and a second, and then it would pass, it could be an action item. So whichever is the pleasure of the board to move forward and take action, although it could be listed as information, but it could be changed through action of the board on the agenda.
Hey, Leo and Kelly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if the only concern is the conduits going to the scoreboard, that's actually part of contingency, because we first have to investigate. There already is a conduit that runs there. We need to make sure that that conduit is adequate enough to handle our future needs. If it's not, by definition, that becomes a contingency change. And since contingency has already been figured into the overall budget cost of this project, which has been approved by both boards, I don't know that we necessarily have to take action on that particular item.
So you're saying that you would fund the
For infrastructure.
conduit and stuff this year? We would not.
If the conduit that is there now is not sufficient enough for future needs, then yeah, that becomes contingency, because it's an existing part of the structure that's already there. It just is no good. If it's got a break in it for whatever, whatever the reason is that it would have to be replaced, it's really no different, Leo, than if we're digging and all of a sudden we come across ground that has to be changed out and it was not picked up at the geo study report. It's just one of those things that contingencies by definition covers. I would think that we would be okay. I mean, we're not talking $100,000, we're talking $10,000 to replace a piece of conduit from one point A to point B. It's not, we're not talking a huge amount of money.
Okay. Tom, didn't Dectronics, when they were up here and spoke with you earlier, weren't they having concerns about whether we had enough power or conduit space?
I would have to make sure and get logistics figured out, but it's my understanding that the current power that we have to that scoreboard is not enough to supply what we would need for this scoreboard that I'm presenting. So there would have to be a change in the power source that would be needed there. That is my understanding.
Well, I'll leave that up to the board with your pleasure.
What are we approving?
Yeah, I don't think there isn't any need for us to do anything, is there, Dan?
Yeah, because the conduit's part of the other project. I don't think we're buying a scoreboard. Do we have to go out to bid for a $500,000 item?
Well, before we go on to that, let me just let's clear up the conduit issue. So if the board is wanting to pull that out, then what we would do is, Mark said that he has a price of $22,000 for replacing conduit. If that's the will of the board to take that item out of the project and acknowledge that you're willing to pay for it separate, that's fine. I'm not so sure that it's necessary though, but whatever you guys want to do.
Well, I guess my point is
Okay.
I don't want to be tearing new field, new turf up on conduit.
Yeah, no,
For a school board next year.
right.
That's why you need.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Leo. We do have specifications from Daktronics, and I hear Daktronics all the time. Quite frankly, it really doesn't matter to me what we put there, and whether it's while we're doing the track project or after track project. But if we have to go out to bid, I can use the Daktronics, their spec sheets, because we have their current draw and everything on there to get the conduit sized, correctly. And I would think that most boards, today with the LEDs and the bells and whistles, they're not going to be too far off. And we would oversize the conduit anyway. Whatever it is, we can go plenty big. In fact, our owner's rep actually suggested that we put 2 conduits in the ground, and that way, if you have an issue with one, then you've got another one for future use.
But I think the question is, do we pay for it, or are you going to do it under your contingency?
Yeah, and I'm telling you that I would be okay doing this under contingency, because we're talking power. I mean, they're saying that the power isn't sufficient, but that does not have to do. Now, if they said that the conduit wasn't the right size for what power we would need, then I would say, okay, then we're going to have to increase. But there's still nothing there definite that tells me that I have to increase the size of the conduit. So,
Okay,
all right.
all right. Well, let's make sure we get that covered before they start putting stuff down and bury it. All right, is there any more discussion on that?
Was Tom going to show the scoreboard?
I don't know, we'll see.
Here, Tom, you gonna present the Tektronix?
Yeah, I would like to be able to do that if that's okay with the board. I mean, that's up to, I know you have to give me the okay to be able to do it. I would like to be able to present it and show it. And it's going to be pretty quick. It would just kind of be a couple of schematics that I could be able to talk. I definitely don't know enough about all the power sources, but I can talk a little bit throughout about what the board does, its options, how it could be used, and then I can show you an overall cost at the very end.
I don't have a problem with anybody else. Have a problem with Tom presenting?
No, I'm fine.
Take off, Tom.
Okay, let me go ahead and I'll get this started and get it set up here. Do you see presentation in front of you there? It's got the big tiger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
This,
We're changing the tiger head this year on the field.
yeah, we'll, that's definitely not going to be the logo that we have. We have an official logo that'll be set up with our paw, but this is kind of what they've been able to use because they've had kind of a plan from the past, and I just told them to have the same kind of layout, but with the new board and everything. So that's just kind of the front page. Going to the second page here, this is an overall look of what the board or the scoreboard would look like. This is just kind of an overall picture. It talks about the truss display and the sound display and the video display, kind of sets up. This is more of a design of what it would look like at our facility. You'll notice a couple of things. I don't know if you can see my mouse as it moves across.
No. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Just to give you a little bit, that does have a play clock. And as part of this package, you'll notice that it's mountable to this particular support. But then on the other side, it would be a mobile type of play clock. A lot of facilities are starting to go with those. So that would be kind of a need. And it did adjust a little bit within regard to the actual size of our scoreboard because we wanted to make sure that there was ample room underneath here that was required. A couple things about the scoreboard itself. This section right here that shows all the football players, and then off to the right, it shows basically sponsors. To give you some understanding, those are actually windows, those ones on the right, and we can move those however we needed. We can adjust the size of those. We could add more. We can make them smaller to give us more of a big screen type of look. And this can be where you could give certain incentives for each of your sponsors that could be here. Obviously, we could have Pepsi be one of our major ones that would be set up here. This is the actual clock that is used. It is kind of a separate device than what is set up with the video board. This is compatible with what we currently have. So the system that we have is a 5000 series system. This piece down here would be compatible for that. The video board would be something different. These are just decals, signs that are set up that you can go ahead and put up on the very top that you'll be able to use. Just kind of gives us a little bit of name. And then this thing that says victory right here is what is considered our sound box. This is the only thing that we would need for our entire stadium. We would not need to have sound over by the press box. This has a 300 big design spread. It's not 360, but it would cover very easily our sound. Historically, we've had a little bit of problems with that. It sounds great in the stadium, but then when you get out on the field, a lot of our performers have a really hard time being able to hear. We've had to turn it up. And we've actually, 2 years ago now, we ended up actually having to pay quite a bit, redo the sound system so that we could have a better setup. So This is actually a speaker, and it is also a video board, so I could change this. There's been designs that shows it's got the tiger paw on there, and you can type in whatever you want, so it's got a lot of features there. This is, again, the overall look of what our scoreboard is set up with. Some of the features, and it gets into quite a bit of different examples, and I'll kind of scroll through them, but I wanted to talk just a little bit about what the use of this could be for. We would obviously be able to use this for our football games. It is also compatible to be able to use for our track. This actual video screen would be where we would put our lanes and places. You could also have it set up to where it would scroll in your field events as they went through, and you can cycle them through. And then when you have a running event, they can pop up there. It is compatible with a finish link system that we already have. If there's any upgrades, it goes with that as well. So this video screen would be our track use. The other thing that it would be used for is, obviously, we have college that uses our football field for their soccer matches. It would be used for that. We have Young American Football that would use this as well. Young American Football wouldn't use the video screen, but our college program could. The other thing that the program options is that it can be used for graduations. A lot of facilities throughout the states use something like this for their graduations. Those that hold them outside, actually shows a picture of them when they're walking across the stage. This also is used, they can be used for community movie nights. So with regard to the use of the scoreboard for community use, it has a multitude of different uses for that. The other thing that it offers is that it's also got a curricular program that is set up that can be used through our theater department. A lot of students, it's kind of like career and college readiness, moving from a theater area to where they would be able to use a lot of these video boards as a resource outside of it. So our theater program would have an option to be able to set up. And in this entire package, it does explain a lot of those options for it. And we would be able to use that through our theater program that we have. Any questions so far?
Is this the same one that you presented to us before?
It's the one adjustment that I had to make, Mr. Gray, is it's a little bit smaller because we had to put in this play clock and I had to adjust it. So if you'll notice, the distance that was here, we would actually have the board. It was a little bit bigger, but then to have this play clock in there, we had to have it just be a little bit smaller. So it is just a touch smaller, but not very much. I'm going to kind of skip some slides. I'm going to try to get to this. Will give you a little bit, and I can turn this a little. This kind of gives you the video input that is set up and some of the computer use. This all does come with the program, except for the computer. We would make sure that we would be able to get the computer to set up for this. I think our tech department would be very helpful in being able to do that. But this is just some of the video display stuff that we have. And we did talk with Daktronics, and we currently have what is called a Shure system. And that Shure system is the same that they use for this. So that follows in line with it. We wouldn't have to look into trying to come up with a whole different sound system than what we already have connected.
Tom, you may be talking about this in the future, but what about the video inputs for this? Do we have a camera that works with this, or do we need to get one?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. We've actually just recently approved our Pixelot camera. It is a motion camera that will be put up on the press box this year, and it will be compatible for this. So when we go, and I'm going to go back, we can actually connect it to this, and so we can be able to actually set it up to where while the play is going on, you can see it on that actual video board with the Pixelot. The nice thing about the Pixelot camera too is It's motion censored, so I don't have to have somebody there to actually move the camera. As the play moves, the camera moves, and it's got several different cameras within it, and it just switches over, and there's no delay. We actually have one in our gym right now. It's set up through the National Federation of High School Sports. So uniquely, we have been granted in, and I'll have to clarify this a little bit because of COVID-19, we're looking at holding on to how we're going to do our rotation for state soccer. But Green River and Rock Springs have been honored and been accepted to take state soccer. And I want to say 2023, 2024. That is 3A and 4A girls and boys. And so part of that requirement is to make sure that we have a camera. Pixelot right now, NFHS has a program. We're able to get 2 cameras. So not only will we have a camera here for state soccer, but we'll also have a camera at the junior high that'll be set up. So that answer your question, Mr. Patillo?
Sorry, I couldn't get to my thing. Yes, that's fine. Thanks, Tom.
Great. Going back to kind of any other questions with the video display control? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip down to slide 9. This is the actual scoreboard that we currently use now. So it's the same system that we have. We wouldn't have to make any kind of adjustments or need to purchase a new one of these. It is already there. It just is very compatible, and we wouldn't have to make any adjustments with that. So that's kind of what we've got set up there. Let me see. I wanted to go and see.
So does it run the track start with the gun?
Actually, yeah, it would. But this particular, and I've changed the slide, this particular board here would just be able to kind of put in some of your very basic stuff. So what you would see as the home and the visitor score, we could put 2020. The video control box that I showed earlier, this slide right here, this one would be what we would use for our track program. Any other questions with that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give you another picture here. This kind of shows how everything is set up and it falls in line with the computer to the Ethernet. Again, it connects with this, and it can show how it's set up with those. And this is that Daktronics computer system that would be used for the video board. Here's kind of a schematic of the shot clock. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of show you what it would look like with a portable version. It's actually slide 21. So I'm going to go to that so you see how it's set up.
Okay, so that would be on the other end of the
Yes,
field.
that would be on the other end, and it would be set up there. It is portable. It's battery operated. It's actually wireless is what it's set up for. And it's just really convenient for them. We would just put it down at the other end. So it's not any kind of additional wiring that would be needed underneath or anything like that. Okay. I wanted to make sure and get to, let's see if I can, here we go. Slide 30, there's a lot of schematic stuff that's on here that I know that Dan and Mark would have better breakdown. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you the soundboard that we have. This is the actual speaker. This is the 1500. This is the one that gives the overall surround. And it's just that one speaker that's up there. Cheyenne South has one like this right now. Even coaching there and being there at other games, it's great sound, and it pronounces really well. So that would be all that we would need there. We would actually get rid of the sound system that's above on the actual press box, and this would be the only thing that we would use. Okay. Next one here kind of shows what that would be connected to. This would be part of it again. As I scroll down, you'll see that some of this stuff is all connected with something we already have, which is that Shure program. It's the same connected. We'd actually have a wireless mic for our announcer, and it'd be set up that way. And this is a picture right here of that mic system that would be set up for them. I did also make sure when Mark and I were talking with them, we talked about making sure that we have a system that's set up for our officials. That would also be a part of it, so that our officials have wireless to be able to go ahead and announce on their games and stuff. So overall, that's kind of everything that's within this slide. I know that there's a lot of busy stuff that shows in here, gives breakdowns of multiple different things. But this is kind of an overview of it. I'm going to go back to the very top just to kind of give you another look of what the scoreboard would look like at our place. That's how it would be set up. I would ask, I don't know, Mark, I know you've been in communication a little bit about what is the understanding behind the current support system that we have now, and whether our board, those supports would handle this board. What do you know about that?
So the last time I talked to them, Daktronics said that they will not sign off on this whole thing, their install, until they've had an outside engineering company come in and do a study of our poles. They want to know how far down they go, the size of the concrete that's down there, and that part of it. So that would be another additional cost that's going to have to be done before we can move forward with probably anybody's board. Doesn't matter whether it's Daktronics or if we went, Colorado Time System or whoever. They're all going to want somebody to tell them what that thing would hold, what it would withstand wind-wise and that kind of stuff. So Daktronics guessed, and I'm thinking it's a low number, but they guessed $10,000 to $15,000 to have that study done.
You guys don't have any as-built?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Any as-built drawings?
We do not. We've looked.
Any other questions with this? I can go ahead and I can pull up another view, and I can kind of show you what the overall cost was for that, if you're good for me to stop sharing this.
Let me ask Mark real quick, since we're on this. Is that something Western can do while the excavation's taking place up there? Because they might want to look at the size of the foundation type that's in there. Is that something that Daktronics would, is it a third party or is it their engineer?
No, it's a third party. They were talking about somebody out of Casper. That's just a company he recommended that has done it for them before. And then, but I'm sure that's probably something Western could probably do for us.
Yeah, since they're already going to be up there, if the cost would be less than $15,000 to have it evaluated.
Yeah, Matt, this is
Yeah.
Dan. I honestly, they gave us some specifications. We took those specifications. I brought in a third party, and they said that they gave us the wrong specifications, and that they wouldn't go by his anyway. So it cost me $2,300 to do a study that they wouldn't accept anyway. So I really do think
You have to use their guy.
I would feel better if whoever we use, if it's Daktronics, that's fine. But they give us a turnkey price from cradle to, all the way. They've got to be able to say, this is what it's going to cost to come in, do their evaluation, everything. Because I know in Evanston, that's how they got stuck. And I don't think any of us would feel comfortable if all of a sudden they came out and they said, well, your specifications were, or your research was not good. If they want to hire Western, fantastic.
Yeah.
But if they have a company that they deal with, my advice would be just let them do the whole turnkey operation. So we have a price and we know exactly what it's going to cost. There's nothing, no hidden, agendas. When the thing is done, here's the bill and everybody's happy.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
some of that stuff, if we had to do any upgrades onto the,
Yes, they have to be done now.
this year.
I agree with that. So I guess Tom can show us what he has for price wise and we can look at that. So.
Okay. If you're comfortable, I'll go ahead and I'll stop sharing this. Is that good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let me go ahead and I'll share. Let me get this pulled up. I think this is okay. Should have another window now. It says a customer quote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and I'll scroll down to the very end. This includes everything that was within that package and looking at total $382,475.
Okay. Now, Kelly, did Sean give you any idea of what they're willing to support with it?
Leo,
Okay.
he did not, but I did not ask any of those kind of details because I did not know the direction of where the rec board would go this evening. So it was more of a courtesy call to let him know that there were some discussions that were being brought forward.
So contractually, all we're required to do is make sure Pepsi's on the board. Now, if we wanted 2 years from now, they wanted to keep their name on the board, then we would say, well, here's your bill to keep your name on the board, correct?
At the end of the contract in 2022, I believe it's in April, then if there was another contract that was entered into, then there could be new specifications or continuing similar, or it could be opened up as a whole for the district. So after that time period, there hasn't been any decisions made in moving forward.
Superintendent McGovern, do you think they would be willing to renegotiate now 2 years earlier to coincide with the purchase of the scoreboard?
You know, if it was the board action through the rec board, and this board was okay following any decisions, I could approach them and see what they would be interested in doing and moving forward if it was firmed up a little bit through board action from the rec board.
Kelly, do we have any obligations to allow anyone else, whether it would be maybe one of the mining companies or a different competing beverage company? Do we have to give them the option to throw something in the pile, or are we not bound by that?
No, I believe, I would have to double check, John, but I believe once we satisfy the contract, then what happens after that is totally up for the school district, I believe. But please don't quote me on that. I didn't pull the contract before we came, so I would have to check those details. But we are under the current obligations for the next couple of years. And again, when I visited with Mr. Valentine, we did not enter into any of those kinds of details. That really wasn't the purpose of the call at that point. So I want to make sure I'm being very, very transparent and open in what the context of that conversation was and what it was not.
Well, I think with the board that you're looking at, Tom, I think it's set up to where we could do whatever advertising they need on there digitally so that we don't have anything that's permanent.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of communicate on that. This gives us a lot of opportunities, and I know with this kind of board that there's been some great revenue that comes in because some of those businesses are going to want to see their name on that. And like I said, you can kind of pick the size of each of those windows. You'll notice on that one that we had, there were 3 big ones on each side. We could have one big one be Pepsi. We could make the soundboard be Pepsi, and then we could pull other sponsors from others, and we could kind of determine, you know, hey, if you want to have a sponsorship for a year, 2 years, whatever the case may be, we'll give you this size, and, you know, you can pay us, I'll just throw out an arbitrary number, $10,000. And according to when I spoke with some of the people at Daktronics, they said that this is a carrot that just is out there in front of it, and people want to be a part of that. He did talk about there was a school in Colorado that uses their board for graduation during that time, and their AD talked largely, they spend a large amount of time on just working through sponsors during graduation because those people want to sponsor one particular kid. And so if they've got 300 kids, guess what? We're popping up 300 different sponsors for a price of, well, it's kind of to our liking. So the opportunities for that are really, really quite valuable. There's a great resource there.
Hey, Tom, I have just an observation when I look through that contract. One, that contract price needs to reflect turnkey, so that because it does specify that we're responsible for the supports. So make sure that they're responsible for the supports. And also, I think on the very top of the contract, if memory serves right, and I talked to Scott about this, it requires us to have the performance bond. And we're not going to take out a performance bond. They're the ones who need to take out a performance bond. And I was kind of shocked when I saw that, but I go through a lot of contracts, so I'm pretty sure that this is the one that kind of struck me funny, that the district was responsible. Because what that means is if they fail to perform or something didn't happen, then we would have to go back on our insurance, and that's generally not the case. So those were two things in the contract, and if you'll resend that to me, I'd sure like to go over it again. But I'm pretty sure that one of the items was that we were responsible for the structural supports. And given the conversations that I know Mark has had with them and I've had with them, they're the ones who suggested bringing a company down from Casper. I would just as soon have them do a turnkey. Then that way there's no break in the flow.
Yeah.
But if we did something like that, Dan, what you're talking about, any work that needs to be done now we'd have to go ahead with the purchase of it this year.
Yeah, I don't know if you can get to it. I'm trying to remember how close it is on, to our track and field as far as trying to get to it. But I think you'd have to cross over the track, which, I mean, from my understanding, they're going to cross over the track anyway. My understanding from what Mark was briefing me is they actually do the track first, and then they run their equipment. They protect the track and run their equipment over the track to get to the field. So I'm not so sure that that's that big of a deal. If it didn't happen this year, it'd be nice if it did, but I'm not so sure that that's.
Well, I think what he means is the underground. If there's an issue with the underground, it's going to have to be evaluated this year.
Well, you're talking about the conduit.
Yeah, no, not the conduit, the foundation itself.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So if you want a turnkey, we're going to have to hire them this year to evaluate that and bring it up to whatever it needs to be.
Or you have to hire them to do the survey, and then they have their survey.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to hire them to do the entire project. You can tell them, okay, send your guys down here and you do the survey. We need a copy of the survey. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it would have to be done this year.
But what if they came down and said that you don't have sufficient foundation, and we have to fix it this year?
Well, I don't know, Leo. Like I said, they're actually installing the track and running their big equipment over it, now. So, I would have thought that they would have done the field first and then the track, but they're actually doing the track first and then the field. So there obviously is a way that they, do this all over the country without destroying tracks. So I don't,
Well, maybe I'm wrong, Leo, but I'm asking about the foundation for the scoreboard. Nothing to do with the track, nothing to do with the install of the sign. If the foundation is not sufficient now, it has to be brought up before we tear up the track to put it in next year. That's what we think he's saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
if you're saying that you want a turnkey operation with Daktronics, that would have to be entered into this year to make sure that that's done before the track and field is complete.
at least a portion of it would be. would have to be done. You don't have to sign a contract for the entire thing, I wouldn't think.
Well,
And do it in phases.
turnkey, why would you go into a turnkey if you're not gonna give them the whole thing? Come up and fix the
Well,
foundation.
they would still be doing the whole thing, except they would do half this year and half next year when it fits our budget. Can they not do that? I mean, at some point, we're gonna have to get started.
Yeah, is this something that goes out to bid? Is this something we can sole source to Daktronics because we have Daktronics stuff? Or are can other companies bid this? And are we going to get in a bind with what they want structurally?
I think the one thing, and I just kind of speak of this because this is the reason why I went with them is because we already have the resources for it. We've already got the controller. We've already got a lot of the sound system stuff with it. I don't know if you go with a different company. That's what we've used for many years. It's what we have in our gyms. It's what we have in our pool. Or maybe I don't think the one in the pool is the same. Actually, I know that's not the case, but the ones in our gym are. So,
Scott, what's the process on something like that? And along with that question, if we have sponsorship, does that reimburse the rec board? So if we get $100,000 from the community, does that go back in the rec board to pay for the sign?
Well, it could go to offset the cost of the project. Yes, it wouldn't necessarily have to go back to the rec board specifically per se, but it could go to offset the cost of the projects. As far as the sole source, my gut is that you want to give fair and open competition to the vendors. It's a lot of money. And even though we have the controllers and some of the other infrastructure, when you're spending $400,000, I'm not sure that quite gets you there. Also, I think you need to consider the service and the maintenance on that as well. So you'll want to find somebody that's going to be able to do that as well. But I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, Dan, about whether it'd be required to go out for bid or not.
Well, we have board policy, then we have state statute. The reason why we went with a Hellas track and field was because of the drainage system that we currently have being Hellas. And the companies that returned my phone calls said, no, we won't use that. We'd have to rip it up. So that was, that fit under the definition of sole source. Where we have a controller, and I don't know how much a controller costs, but if the tail is wagging the dog, then that's not going to fit the definition of sole source. I don't know how. I mean, that would be something that you would have to argue your case for a sole source, because quite frankly, I don't know enough about scoreboards. That's more in your wheelhouse than it is mine, and Mark may be able to help. But I don't know that anything that we do with replacing a scoreboard would be fitting into a sole source.
Because we are having to change the power, that we already know that the power is not sufficient. The data line conduit is not sufficient. They both have to be bigger. The controller itself, they run about $1,300. So to answer Dan's question on the controller, we've had to replace the one at the high school before, so I know what that ran. But to consider it sole source, I mean, we're changing everything basically. So I don't know that it could be sole source. Yeah, and Tom, I think that the board in the pool is also Daktronics, but that's neither here nor there.
I guess my question would be is, we reach out, we find out the engineering that needs to be done to ensure that we have a proper foundation for it if we do go with whoever. And if we're going to do that, that's what has to be done this year. Now, who scoreboard we buy, that has nothing to do with it. I think typically, I think the newer scoreboard's going to be a lot lighter than the older ones, just because of the electronics is a lot easier to deal with. But I think the biggest part we have to deal with now is taking care of to make sure we have a strong enough foundation to put whatever we want up there, whoever it is, and it's going to be able to be supported without tearing everything up to put it in next year.
Yeah, Leo, normally I would agree with you. But our structural guy looked at the sign, the information that we had, which actually was a bigger version of the sign, and said that our structural supports would support it. And their guy said, no, we don't agree with your structural guys. So I found that very odd. But, it matters not, I agree with you that it's, be nice to tear up now. But the bottom line is, if we run the conduits there, surely these guys put scoreboards in on fields every day. I'm not so sure that it's that big a deal that they don't do it. If they don't do it right now and they wait, I mean, yeah, would it be an inconvenience? Probably. But these guys just put in too many scoreboards to worry about going in and messing up a track. As long as
No. What if the foundation is? I just throw a number out. The foundation support on that is a 3x3 square concrete block, and they need a 6x6. If they don't do that this year, they have to come in and tear that whole area out to put a foundation to support those steel poles.
Mm-hmm.
They can drive on that track all they want later, because I'm pretty sure it'll carry out. But what I'm talking about is going in and re-tearing up that whole end zone area to put a new footing.
I mean,
that's why it has. Am I right, Leo?
Yeah, I think what we need to take a look at is, even if we hire somebody locally to take a look at what we have there, to let us know what our foundation is capable of. And is it strong enough to hold up? I mean, the specs on the scoreboard we're looking at right now, I mean, the weight and the wind resistance and all that should be part of that spec that we should be able to take an engineering group up there and say, tell us, is this going to be able to handle this?
Because it's a lot bigger. There's a lot more square footage on that sign. So it's going to have a bigger wind area than the smaller one that's up there. So are those poles sufficient, and is the footing sufficient to hold them? The weight of the sign probably isn't significant. It's the shear on it.
In a Wyoming wind.
Yeah.
That's my point. Because if we have to make any adjustments to that foundation, I'd rather do it now before they tear everything up.
I agree 100%. I paid for the first engineering survey. If you guys want to pay for another one, have at her. I'd be
But
more
if they
than
wouldn't
happy.
accept it, it's not.
Well, what I would say, Dan, is to find out the specs. I don't know, Tom, if we can get
We have the specs.
what the specs require.
Yeah, we have them.
If our engineering group can say, yeah, what you have, we'll take that.
Okay.
Find out what we have to do to make it that way.
Yeah, I think
Was
the one that was kind of interesting that I wanted to kind of make sure of is as we were going through the numbers they've done for a survey, they didn't support. Is that correct, Dan?
That is correct.
So and I'm fully in agreement that we need to evaluate to make sure that those support beams are going to handle what we would want, and not only what we would want now, but what's going to be for the future. I just want to make sure that it's not in a situation, let's say, for instance, if we do end up going with Daktronics and then Daktronics says, no, well, we didn't support your survey. We didn't support the people that did it. So what I would be encouraging of that situation is if we're going to do that, then I think we need to make sure that it's Daktronics approved. Whether they have them themselves do it or whether they say the people from Western and Casper do it or whatever, because then if we do in fact go with Daktronics or with somebody else, I think we would get great support if we did use a different scoreboard company to know that this is what was done with this particular survey and it followed suit with what Daktronics does, and Daktronics uses they're nationwide. So that would be the only thing that I would find to be, I guess, adamant about is just I would hate to be in a situation where we do it, we say it's structurally sound, and then our scoreboard company comes in and says, we don't support those specs. And now we're back to ground zero.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I don't have a problem with hiring Western, whoever that outfit is out of Casper Daktronics uses. Having them come down and do an assessment of what we have and see if it's capable or not.
Yeah, I agree with that for the future, but it has to be done now during this part of this phase.
Yeah.
Is there any basis to have a conversation about the fact that the bid process would include that turnkey? And if Daktronics in fact had to do something to that area, that would be part of what they bid us. Instead of us thinking, well, we need to do this and we need to do that, can we say to these companies, we want a board, what do you have to do to our facilities to get it? Put it in your bid and let's dance.
Yeah. I think the bad thing is if there is work to be done up there, it's going to possibly delay what Hellas is doing. It could. So, I mean, that's kind of a big thing to tear off. Because if it puts them behind schedule, they're not going to be happy. Because they're on a pretty tight schedule. So,
Do we have any drawings at all of the foundation, Mark?
Leo, we do not.
Mark, I can look tomorrow in the archives that we have and see if there's anything on that, just for an idea that we might have something at City. I don't think so, but we might. I'll look.
Matt, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try that tomorrow.
In regard to time frame a little bit, I know that Matt, you kind of brought up a good point about how that could delay Hellas and everything. I know I've kind of already planned scheduling wise for us to be prepared to not be on that field game one. But I know in an ideal situation, we definitely want to be. But if it's because we've got to get this done and it does take a little bit more time, I just wanted to let everybody know I have planned for that. Fortunately,
but I don't think that would be the big deal. I think that would be if you delay Hellas for 2 weeks, you're going to be paying Hellas a lot more money.
You're going to be paying some big fees.
Because they're coming from out of state and they're not going to hang around and wait when they have a schedule put out for us. So that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I just wanted to let you know from our standpoint.
Oh,
But
yeah, for sure. For
I mean,
sure.
I don't know, you could probably get Hellas to dig whatever Western needs in order to verify, but.
So I guess to move forward with this, would it be appropriate to fund a Daktronics engineering group to go up there during this process and take that out of the discretionary fund so we can have that done now and budget the money for next year for the scoreboard?
I would think that's what we need to do. So, I mean, what's the pleasure of the board? John, what's your feelings?
My only concern, and someone else has more experience in this state with that, is do you actually meet the qualifications of the bid? If you give one company that much of a leg up and say, we want you to do this so we can use you, that would be my only concern. And I don't know how that works. I know that, when we bid this out, or if we choose to bid this out, there are rules that govern that for certain. So that'd be my only concern.
To be quite honest with you, I think anybody that has a professional engineering stamp that goes up there and does a structural assessment, Daktronics can't ignore and say, no, we don't agree with it.
Should be able to.
Well, gentlemen, why don't we just because we're going to have to, if it's $10,000, we don't have to advertise for professional services. And then we just hire the people that they recommend, and we use Daktronics Scoreboard as the basis of the design, the structural engineering design. Then that way we're no violations of any state statutes. You have to design to something. They would be the more state-of-the-art design out there, And then that way we would use, if somebody was to say something, we can say, we're going to use their specifications as the basis of a bid when we go out to bid.
I agree with that.
All right, well, what's the pleasure? Somebody want to make a motion and we'll move forward.
Dan, do we need to put a dollar amount to that? We do?
I would say at least like 10,000.
Well, did Dan say 23,000 for their engineer before?
Actually, Mark knows the price.
Mark?
So Daktronics told me that they guesstimated it would be between 10 and 15,000. Now you're also looking at their upcharge. If we go directly to them, I think it's going to be cheaper, less expensive. But going with the company that Daktronics would like us to go to would, at least if we do go Daktronics, they're going to say, oh yeah, you used who we wanted anyway. So, I mean, that's something to think about. I still think we do hire them ourselves, but I think we need to probably budget them out at least 15,000.
Scott, is that something we can take out of discretionary, or do we have to make a motion? And
Yeah, we would need to make a motion, but yes, that is something that we can take out as discretionary. Do we want to leave ourselves a little buffer?
Yeah, I think you gotta go 20 just in case.
20. So could I make a motion to set aside $20,000 for the engineering of the future scoreboard? Does that sound good?
Or the study of the structure, scoreboard structure?
For this, yes, my bad, for the study of the foundation system of the scoreboard.
And I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Hire an individual engineering firm to do an assessment on our scoreboard foundation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, moving on, we'll go to board information on update the preliminary budget. Would that be you, Mr. Scott?
Okay, very good. Money that we have to play with in total. And so I've estimated what I think the cash is going to be at the end of June. And then also took a stab at the revenues coming in from the mill levy. And I reduced it by 25%. Who knows really how that's going to come in, but I think it's going to come in substantially lower than what we've seen in prior years. So that's a pretty soft number there. But I did take a stab at reducing the current year's collections by 25%. So that gives our total revenues for the year of about 1.175. If you have the cash and the revenues, you're looking at a little over 11 million. And then I've rolled forward the projects that are still ongoing. So that's what you'll see there. If you come down to the district discretionary amount, that 970,000, I think that's the top end. And how I got there was I took the total revenues and subtracted off all of the other projects in there for now, except for the turf and the track replacement at the high school. And so that reflects the amount of estimated revenues that would not need to go toward like maintaining our ongoing projects. So, and I would suggest that we don't go over that, because then we're, in my mind, dipping into the reserves. And I say that because if you go down one more item, the deferred maintenance. So I put together a schedule of the projects that we've already done and rolled that forward for a year. So Zach, if you could go to page 2 of that for me, please. So I know it's kind of small, but the requirement to fund the replacement of the projects that we already have going is about 4.472. And so if you look over on the right-hand side of that box, the amount that comes on for replacement is a little over 700,000 per year. And so knowing that, if you take the 200,000 that we know it takes for the ongoing projects, and then we're going to have the turf and track field coming on as soon as it's complete, and over a 10-year life, we're looking at about 130,000. So by the time you take all of those together, we're pretty close to using our revenues that we bring in for the year. And so I think that we're reaching the saturation point of some of these bigger projects. We do have some reserves. Can you jump back to that first one? So we do have some reserves. That amount there, it's shown as zero, but it should be 4,145,853, which is up a couple $100,000 from the previous year. But we do have some money set aside for some other big projects, but I think we need to be real careful on the magnitude and the number that we bring on, because otherwise we won't be able to cover the replacement costs in an environment where our property tax collections are a lot less than what they normally are. Any questions on that piece, the discretionary amount? And we can make that any amount that we want, but
Any discussion, gentlemen? Any questions?
okay, no questions. Further down, our total cash reserves would be 4.47, and then the total expenditures and cash reserves would be about 6.9, and then that leaves an amount of a little over 4 million for a reserve for future expenditures.
That's just information. We have to make any motion or move on that to accept the budget is updated.
Yeah, and what we'll normally do further on the agenda, there are some projects that may come forward, and so if it's the pleasure of the board, we'll bake those projects into the preliminary budget, and then I'll bring an updated prelim at the next meeting in June, so we can kind of get a better idea about where we're at.
And there was the funded projects. That's different than what you're going to be bringing forward.
Well, further on the agenda, there's an item for
I could speak to
requested
that.
projects.
Leo, if you wanted, we could jump down to that and I could go ahead and speak to that. That might help as we go back up to the budget question.
Okay.
The bylaws of the rec board state that any new projects need to be in a written proposal that are submitted to me by March 1st. And so I sent out an email on that on February 9th. And I received one that came in after the date. So with the bylaws, I'm not bringing that project forward. There weren't any others that came forward. And then in the minutes from the January meeting, there was a project that was brought forward, and the rec board had requested that there was additional information be brought back in by March 1st, and I did not receive any information on that either. So at this time, I don't have new projects to bring forward to build into the discretionary part or create a line item.
Well, is this where we would have to add the scoreboard for next year?
I'm thinking so, yes.
So would that have to be done in a motion and a vote, Scott?
Yeah, that's actually the item number 13. So normally what we do is we just take the preliminary budget and then we would add those other projects to it. And, you know, most likely those will be coming out of that discretionary line item there. So we'll show the project and then a lesser amount for the discretionary piece.
Hey, Scott, is this where we would add the resurfacing of the track for next year?
If that's the pleasure of the board, yes.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions or discussion on Kelly's information that she brought up on the future projects?
Do we have, to follow those bylaws, do we have a request from the junior high to do the work on the track? Or is this something that we can do through you, through Dan and Mark?
John, to answer that, I do not have a written request per the bylaws. However, this board could, through the action of this board, determine to add line items as they build in the budget for next year. Mine was feedback and input from our stakeholders. That's the avenue that they bring those forward to this board. And I don't have those, but the board can take its own action on items for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Kelly, just an FYI, we do have a facilities plan review from the junior high on the repair of the track.
Okay, I did not bring that forward, Mark, because that was not an actual proposal for the rec board. And I know that Dan had replied on that plan review and had mentioned that he was aware of the concern, totally different things.
Yes, okay.
So thank you.
All right, if there's no questions or discussion about the preliminary budget or the project, we'll move on to board action number 13, which is recommended approval for future projects of the preliminary budget for 2020 through 2021 fiscal year. So would you have anything to add into that, Scott, or would this be where we would add the scoreboard and the track?
Yes, this would be where those projects would be added. Yes. And probably the study too, although that would just roll over because we're putting in this year's budget, but it just makes it cleaner.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, I would like to make a motion to add the scoreboard as part of the budget.
We have to give a amount, Scott?
Yes, we do. We do.
Could we do possibly 450,000, not to exceed 450? A motion for that.
So let's ask Dan. Dan, do you think that's enough contingency for if we have to do some structural change?
No, because the sign, the price that we have now for the sign, what was it, Tom?
382.
382. So there's 400,000. If you have to do the, structure, whatever the cost of that's going to be, probably, if you took 450 and added at least 8% on top of that, that'd probably be a pretty good number.
Scott, what is that?
I don't have my phone with me, but just off the top of my
On the
head,
top of your head.
it's going to be around 500,000 because 10% is 45,000.
Yeah.
So I'll clean that up. I would like to make a motion for the budget year 2021, 2020-2021 for $500,000 for a scoreboard at the Rockford High School.
I would second that.
Would we need to add the contingency of the structural assessment this year into that same motion, or should that be separate, Scott?
It's cleaner if it could be included in this board action item for the preliminary budget. So yeah,
So if
we
you
need,
got 100,000 scoreboard and
515,
I'm sorry, the 20,000?
515.
520, I think we were talking 20,000, Matt.
Okay, I'll show those as separate line items if that's okay. The study's separate from the scoreboard.
So you'll have one for 500,000 for the scoreboard and one for 20,000 for the construction assessment.
Yes.
I got a motion on the floor for that. Anybody got a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Wait.
Say aye.
Aye.
Hold on, we got the junior high track as well.
Oh,
Do
I
we
was
want
just gonna do them separate.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. Well, we've already got a motion and a second on the floor for one item. I'd like to vote on that, and then we'll do another one for the track. So all those in favor for the scoreboard as motion, say aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Mark, I think we'll throw this one to you about the track.
Okay, I would entertain adding the replacement of the junior high track, going out to bid next year to replace the track at the junior high. I think we're probably gonna have to put, and Dan, correct me if you think this wasn't correct, but maybe a budgeted amount of about $350,000.
Yeah, that should work, because if we end up going bid for it, we'll probably get a pretty decent price.
So I would second that.
All right, I got a motion and a second on the floor for replacement of the junior high track. Is there any discussion or just questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
Aye.
Opposed?
and
Motion carried.
can we also discuss as a board whether we want to ask the superintendent to pursue the interest with the, was it Western Wine Beverage?
It is.
Bev?
Yep, to see if they want to go in on some funding for the scoreboard. I think it would be prudent to see if they would renegotiate their contract a little bit earlier to help offset the purchase of the scoreboard in the year in which it's purchased, as opposed to waiting 2 years down the line to renegotiate that.
Yes, I would suggest that. Is that something? I don't know the legalities of that. I guess you could.
Well, I guess we can entertain a motion to have the superintendent meet Wyoming Beverages and open up negotiations for the purchase support of the scoreboard, if they would like to continue. Is that appropriate?
Through action.
Yes, so moved.
Is there
I'll
any
second.
discussion?
No.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Are there any other projects you'd like to spend money on?
Can I go back a step? I remember that we had a proposal that was sent to us by Mr. Candelaria. And I remember we encouraged him to give that to us with the time schedule that we have. There were some portable hoops that we had in our January meeting. Did we get anything, or is there any kind of an update on that? Is there a different funding source?
Didn't we? Or approved purchasing?
That was the item I was referring to from the January 7 minutes. In preparing for this meeting, I do not have any additional requests for information. that the rec board was asking back in January. I have not received anything.
And again, I just think that there was a request made. It wasn't made in the right time. That doesn't mean there isn't a need. Tom, do you feel comfortable weighing in on that, or?
Here's what I could tell you that I do remember in that January meeting that that there was the request, and then obviously the board had made suggestions for further information. Did relay that to Mr. Candelaria, and I have not received any further feedback as to what next steps are. I would definitely say that he's probably have an interest for that. It's not going to be something he's just going to say, well, no big deal. I guess I just won't worry about it. But he is aware that it was, for lack of a better term, denied.
Okay, I just wanted to keep the door open if that was something we felt like we wanted to support.
Okay.
Clarification with that, he can make another request next year, and it doesn't have to be set up as a board action item right now, does it?
No.
Actually, I don't think the purchase price of them was that high. If he still wanted to do it, we could probably do it under discretionary future date.
I think the issue with that, Leo, is he didn't get the building sign-offs for storage on those things, so there was nowhere to put them. So until the high school, I believe, has a place to store them, I don't know that we can. I mean, we could free up the money, but they have nowhere to put them.
Okay.
Because they're pretty good
Yeah,
size.
but I understand that. Okay, is there any other projects anybody would like to propose for next year's budget? All right, we'll move on to the last item, which is our next meeting is June 22nd at 4:30. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yes, it is.
Kelly, do I have a board meeting that evening also?
We do. We have, when Scott and we were looking at some dates, that actually is the public hearing that we have in June. We have 2 board meetings in June as we close out the fiscal year. So we have that for 6 o'clock. We did something similar last year, if that works for this board, where we started one and then finished one and then went to the other. That way, if there was any items to reimburse the general fund, we would be able to do that before the year ended.
I'm fine with that if you are, Kelly. I just didn't know if I scheduled correctly. That was really my question.
We loaded up a day, totally.
All
Thank you.
right, at that meeting, I think we'll be talking about end of year warrants and election and appointment of officers to begin July 1. All right, is there anything else anybody would like to bring up and discuss? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Doing
Thank
this
you.
in person in June, Kelly?
Boy, that's a magical question. I don't know, to be honest with you. We'll have to see how things are going at that time. If not, we'll see you through the camera.
All right,
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
everybody.
Thank you.